G'day and welcome to another quick review of a video that caught my attention. It's Motormouth again, and he's got some wacky ideas, and I just thought I'd, on the fly, make some suggestions, some of my own personal comments as a naysayer and a troll. I disagree with a lot of what this guy says. I think he's a bit of a thickhead, but I'll leave it up to everyone else to make up their own minds. I'm no expert on thickheads. I try not to associate with them, but with my interest in APTERA, I seem to come across far too many of them. This is on the fly. I've watched it through once. I haven't even thought about it. So, once again, it's going to be just what comes out of the top of my head when I decide to stop him and see what I can put in as an interesting video for people who have open minds. Let's see what happens.
In case you weren't aware, APTERA's finalized pricing hasn't really been announced yet. On more recent investor webinars and reservation holder Q&As, they've said that the launch edition they expect to be around $35,000. But I think a lot of critics of APTERA are immediately quick to compare it to
Let's start with, in case you're not aware of APTERA's pricing hasn't been finalised yet. APTERA's pricing hasn't been finalised for the past 4 years. So if you haven't been aware, you've been hiding under a rock.
Everything else on the market, even though it's really nothing like anything else on the market, because they say, oh, well, this can't compete with X or this can't compete with Y, because
it can't compete with X or Y because it's not on the market. X and Ys are on the market. This is a solid fact. It can't compete with any other vehicle because it still does not exist. Prototypes don't count. I've been saying that for 2 years.
Because a lot of people just generally think this two-seater, three-wheeled vehicle that can go 400, 600, 1,000 miles on a charge with self-charging wireless technology thanks to the sunlight.
People only think that these can do those mileages thanks to sunlight because they've been told it. They have never been shown it. It's never been proven. If people think they can do that, they're listening to snake oil salesmen and they're swallowing the garbage.
It's not cool enough in itself. No, the price has to also be good for it to sell. Whereas, truthfully, I think a lot of people are comparing it to the wrong thing. At least,
price has to be good for anything to sell. It doesn't matter how good the product is. It has to have a price that reflects its utility. APTERA doesn't work. APTERA doesn't exist. APTERA doesn't need to worry about pricing at all until it works and until it is for sale. This talk about pricing is already crossing bridges before getting there.
With the launch edition, that's not their entry-level model, okay? We should be comparing the launch edition to any other vehicle on the market with a 400-mile range, and you'll quickly find out that if you want an EV that can go that long without stopping, yeah, it's not going to be very easy, and it's going to cost you a pretty penny.
I'll stop here and later do some research just to see what sort of 400-mile vehicle you can get for how much money and compare it to the $33,200 that APTERA is currently pretending to be asking.
People say, okay, what about Tesla's next generation vehicle platform? That's going to cost $25,000, right? That's going to eat into the success of the APTERA. And of course, because Tesla said it would cost $25,000, we should all assume it's going to cost $25,000 because that worked out so well last time, didn't it? Also based on Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon.
I've told Bruce Nelson, many times over not to compare with Tesla. Don't compare with a failure and say that something else has a right to fail. When I was growing up, I was next door to a couple of boys, actually 3 boys, all sons of my neighbours, and I would constantly hear, and well, it depends on what you call constant, but many times over the years, I would hear one of them get a whack for doing something wrong, and then that person screaming, "Oh, but Peter did it." "Oh, but Rodney did it." "Oh, but Jeff did it." They are the first names of the 3 boys in question. And I used to laugh. Even at a young age, I used to laugh so much at the poor logic of one brother getting caught for doing something, getting smacked, and thinking that if he told on the other ones, that somehow that made it right for him. That somehow he shouldn't get a smack because one of the brothers has already done it and got away with it. All he did was dob him in, and Mum just went off looking for the other one and gave them a hiding as well. It was so funny. And from then on, I've always thought never compare with somebody else and then say that's justification for doing it yourself. It's not. I don't care if Tesla's failed in meeting deadlines or meeting price promises. It has nothing to do with APTERA and is certainly no justification for APTERA doing it. Not at all. If they're bad, they're bad. It doesn't matter if others are bad as well.
It sounds like Musk has kind of pushed off and is no longer very interested in making a $25,000 car because he believes robo-taxis are about to be solved next year, as in 2020. I mean 2021. I mean 2020. I mean 2023. One of these years, eventually, we're going to have robo-taxis driving.
This just shows what an idiot this guy is. He's throwing a tantrum like a 4-year-old.
Us around everywhere, and we won't need steering wheels and pedals and all of that stuff. So why fuss around with selling a passenger car that's $25,000? Just keep in mind that's kind of the Tesla situation we're in right now. I wouldn't get too hung up on what Tesla originally said years and years ago because they changed their mind a lot, and there's a good chance that the whole $25,000 car is kind of off the table at this point. But
I've always bought cars and motorcycles my whole life and avoided anything that is ride sharing, even before it was ride sharing. The nearest thing to it was catching a bus or a train, public transport. I never used public transport unless it was absolutely essential for some emergency reason. In my whole life, I never used it. Now, there are millions of people like me who don't care less about whether robo-taxis turn up on street corners in every city. They would sooner just have their own car or motorbike. And so the market is still there. And all of this nonsense about, I don't know what he's really going on about. He's just ranting.
even if you want to talk about the Chevy Bolt coming back from GM, or the Volkswagen coming out with the ID2 that just got delayed again, the base model APTERA, I think, will, in the long term, end up being the more popular option, because as we've seen in the EV space, a lot of people can actually get by with a range around 250 to 300 miles, and the latest info we've gotten from APTERA that I received during our factory tour was that the standard range option, the cheapest APTERA, would have a 26 kilowatt hour battery pack capable of going about 260 miles on a charge. But if you go back and watch my interview with the CEO from about a year ago, there was actually talk about potentially in the future switching to cheaper battery chemistries, maybe for fleet options or whatever, offering an 18 kilowatt hour battery pack that would be lithium iron phosphate.
He's talking about potentially switching in the future, and that started a year ago. There has been no switching. As far as I can tell, all they've done to date is they say they have been making battery packs. Now, they mustn't be using them because now they've contracted with somebody to supply batteries and battery packs. So this is just nonsense when you delve into it. And APTERA is talking about what they're going to change to in the future when they haven't even got, unless you count the ones they've stockpiled somewhere and are about to dump, they haven't even got something now. Why talk about what you're going to change to in the future when there's nothing now?
So it would be more weight on the overall vehicle, maybe close to the weight of the 2170 cells they plan on using in the launch edition. But Chris Anthony, the CEO, his previous startup was Flux Power, which specialized exclusively with lithium iron phosphate battery packs in forklifters. So he's well aware of cheaper battery.
It's very telling that Chris Anthony isn't the battery supplier. If he knows so much, why is he looking to Korea to supply batteries? What was wrong with his company just making the packs for APTERA? It just doesn't make sense to me unless there's something wrong with him paying himself. And I believe as a Ponzi scheme, that's probably the wrong thing to do. It's no good paying yourself. You'll get caught. What you need to do is pay Korea and somebody obscure. You've got less chance of getting caught.
chemistries, he knows how to manage them, and I think long term there is probably a goal to get cheaper battery chemistries in the APTERA, which is why after the initial hype wave of first deliveries begin, the launch edition models, there's almost 2,000 accelerators in a shrinking number every day. Those people who are pouring, tens of thousands, some of them hundreds of thousands of dollars into the company, they're of course going to pay whatever APTERA asks, and I think they'll be happy to.
I'll go back after making my comments and just see how many people are paying large amounts of money into the accelerator program. Because I believe out of 8 billion people in the world, you can get a large number of suckers.
Because they're just such a firm believer in the company. If someone's on a budget and is looking for an affordable vehicle option, those are probably not the kind of person to drop over $100,000 in stock on a startup company like this. That's why I think the launch edition pricing, similar to how the Cybertruck Foundation series pricing is outrageous and insanely high, I don't think the launch edition pricing of the APTERA matters in the grand scheme of things, because the product, I think, and the company will outlive the initial hype phase where everybody who has a ton invested in the company will of course pay whatever they need to pay to get their hands on one, because they're just so in love with the product. So I personally think,
well, I'll see how many have a ton of money invested just to work out how many sales they're going to get. And then just think about how many that aren't in that large investment amount who will more than likely cancel, maybe even want their investment money back.
based on their long-term vision and the potential of using cheaper battery chemistries in the future, I think APTERA actually needs to widen out and spread out the pricing ladder a little bit. And that means I think their more expensive option should be more expensive, and I think their cheapest option should be even cheaper. And that could be by any means necessary. It could be using cheaper materials, it could be using a different kind of display, or who knows, maybe there's a good way to build a rear-wheel drive APTERA for those who don't need the all-wheel drive or don't care as much about the 0 to 60. I could imagine it saving a decent amount of money and weight if you just took out the dual motor system on the front 2 wheels and instead just had one motor propelling you from behind.
It will save both money and weight. But if you really want to save weight, ditch all of the solar. That stuff is pretty heavy. Ditch all of the solar. Have one-wheel drive at the back and no solar altogether.
I'm not an engineer. I'm not exactly sure how they can cut costs, but I do know that there is some up-and-coming battery technology like sodium-ion cells, which are just now launching in a few Chinese electric vehicles, as well as in individual cell forms like Mike in the Woods has been purchasing. And sodium-ion is supposed to drastically reduce the price of cylindrical cells, and also is a much more robust cell when it comes to winter driving. So
Sodium-ion battery technology is more than a year old. More than a year ago, they were talking about sodium-ion cells coming out in the future. If APTERA really was interested in making the most efficient vehicle, and they knew that by extending the production time using CPC was inevitable, then they should have been planning on these up-and-coming technologies that were going to beat them to production. They haven't. They've stuck with old stuff.
But I think for a lot of people, the APTERA is going to be the secondary vehicle, the one that dad or mom drives to work and back. And in those cases, 200 miles of range is plenty. So if you have to sacrifice on the maximum range number a little,
if this is only going to be a secondary vehicle, then there are far better cars that would fit the bill. One I can think of is the Squad, I think it's called. A Squad prototype that will be also coming out in 2024. Hopefully they'll meet the deadline. But the Squad solar-powered EV is great for a secondary car, just for mum and dad to commute to work and even maybe do a bit of shopping in. APTERA is just over the top in every way possible, and it's snake oil that's designed to be all things to all people, when it isn't. At the moment, it's still nothing to everyone. It doesn't exist, but it is just wrong. It may appeal on looks to some people. It may appeal because the snake oil salesmen are saying it saves the world. It doesn't save the world. It can't save the world. The mathematics just aren't there for every EV owner having one for the purpose of saving the world. Climate change will go on its merry march and probably doom us all, whether we have APTERA or not. That's just advertising BS from the snake oil salesman.
It could also be the fun getaway car for mom and dad when they need a break from the kids.
There are plenty of motorcycles that walk all over APTERA for being fun, and as they do that, they're half the price. Remember, he makes comparisons, but he's not comparing apples with apples. Basically, it's a cycle, and motorcycles are more like APTERA than quadricycles are, or EVs, real vehicles, not farm implements that might be four-wheeled, or golf carts. He's making comparisons with things like the Chevy Bolt and the Volkswagen ID2 and the Tesla Model 2 or whatever it's going to be called. He's making comparisons with things that are just out of APTERA's league in so many ways. He should be comparing to a Suzuki Hayabusa or a Kawasaki Z1000, something closer to what it really is.
And in the same way, I think APTERA should try to get cheaper on the low end. I think you could probably secure higher margins on your higher range option because very few electric vehicles on the market can go 600 miles. Basically, none of them. There's a few technically that under very generous government test cycles, like in China, that can kind of hit 600 miles, but APTERA is targeting for EPA range estimate to be 600. And on top of that, they believe with the right cells, the 21120s, they can get 1,000 miles of range out of their highest end option.
He's just selling the snake oil. There's no point in saying no EV on the market can get 600 miles when all he's got going for him is that snake oil liar in front of him saying that APTERA can get 600 and 1,000 miles. There is no proof, none at all. There has not been any APTERA prototype do anywhere close to 15 miles as far as I can tell. I have not seen one go more than, I guess, the longest drive I've ever seen is Jay Leno, and I would estimate that to be under 5 miles, and it was slow. So where's this 600,000 miles coming from? It's coming from lies, and he's swallowed the lies. It's that simple. If he wants to sell this stuff, he should wait until he knows they can do the mileage, because at the moment all he's doing is passing on the lies.
Else can touch that, right? So if anybody needs a 1,000 mile range EV, basically you have no other choices other than the APTERA, which is why I think they should charge a bit more than, $45,000, $50,000 for that.
No, they have no choice at all. APTERA isn't there to choose. It's just not there. It's a snake oil product made up of 5 fake prototypes that have only mostly driven in car parks. They have not proven to be useful products. We have seen the X Prize contestant fail due to overheating. We have seen NBC or CBN or something like that, test drive fail on a small hill due to overheating. We've seen Nikki from Transport Evolved on a flat surface overheat, where she's had to get rescued because she can't drive any further. We have all these overheating problems that prove the silly trike is not fit for purpose. And what do we get in lieu of it? We get lying excuses, reasons why it shouldn't have overheated, but it did. The evidence is that it did. The excuses are unsubstantiated. We can't rely on those excuses. Then they come out with a video of one doing about 400 yards up a steep hill, and they say, we have done this 5 times over. It's about 6 point something miles. It's about 6 point something miles. So now we've proven it works. No, they haven't. They've just kept on lying. They've proven it can go 400 meters. And even then, with their video skills, they can even fake that. They can easily fake that 400 meters because these days, seeing is not believing anymore. We've gone past that when it comes to video editing. So there is no proof. And what I'm saying is get independent testers and have them all with their skills test it properly and tell us what the thing can do and what it can't do. Don't let the snake oil salesman fool you and just wait until evidence is there. This is one thing I don't like about people with skin in the game, is that they are misleading people as they present what they say are truths. when there's no truth behind it. There's no evidence, no proof. It's all snake oil.
I think they could easily get away with that being a $55,000-$60,000 EV because people who really want 1,000 miles of range, there's no other options on the market. So you just price it as high as you want, make up for those thinner profit margins on the lower end APTERA with the thicker margins on those higher end APTERA, because no one's going to be able to tap that for possibly decades. I don't think Tesla or Lucid or Rivian is going to be targeting 1,000 mile range variants in the future. And sure, the market for people who want range that high is pretty niche. But again, that's all the more reason to charge a lot of money for it, because I personally know a lot of people out there that are excited for the APTERA and want to own a high range option, and they're the kind of people that are used to spending $50, $60, $80, $90,000 on their EV. So
there's no point having a 1,000 mile range vehicle if after 3 hills you're stopping and waiting 30 minutes for it to cool down. Nor is it useful if after, I don't know what your Fahrenheit degrees are, I think something like 85 degrees, being a particularly warm day, say 85 degrees, and for me 35 degrees Celsius. There's no point having a 1,000 mile vehicle if on any day over those temperatures it wants to stop every 15 minutes and spend 30 minutes cooling on the side of the road. Who cares if it can go 1,000 miles on a single charge? If it has all those 30-minute breaks, you're just going to hate it.
to them, if you're used to spending, $80,000-$90,000 on an EV that goes 400 or 500 miles on a charge, then they're going to have no problem spending $60,000 on an EV that goes 1,000 miles on a charge, right? What do you guys think of the APTERA pricing structure? Do some of you think they're too cheap or too expensive? I personally think the launch editions should cost a lot more than $35,000 because the accelerators are going to get a meaningful discount on them anyway, and a lot of them have already dropped well over $100,000 into the company. So to them, what difference is a $40,000 car versus a $30,000 car? But all those thoughts, let me know what you're thinking down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel.
Once again, he doesn't want my opinion because he blocks me. It's that simple. And he blocks me because I'm no good for his income stream. That's all it is. It's nothing to do with truth. It's nothing to do with being a naysayer. It's nothing to do with being kind and gentle in having opposing views. Nothing to do with any of that. It's simply because it's hurting his income stream if he allows me to put my views in the comments. And so on that basis, he blocks. And it's not just me, it's lots of others. He's manipulating. I don't like him. Now, I don't hate anybody, but there are certain people that I would sooner not hear, and they are influencing others who aren't intelligent enough to see through what he's doing. Well, that's all from me. One more time, just stick it to the disciples till I find another one. Bye for now and stay safe.